Hi friends, Mary Talina here. I make my own kombucha, and many friends have asked me how. It's very easy, so I thought I'd make this little video to show you. First, assemble the equipment that you need, starting with a stainless steel cooking pot. It needs to be stainless, not aluminum or non-stick. I got this one at Big Lots. It was very inexpensive. You also need a glass jar about this size. I got this one at Target. You'll need to start collecting your bottles. Now you can buy empty bottles for beer making or kombucha making. You can find them online. But I preferred to collect bottles from commercial manufacturers because it's about the same price as empty bottles and I get to drink the kombucha too. Now I like these brands. Anything by GT, that's a big brand, or Kavita. And the reason is that I know that these bottles and their lids will hold the fizziness, will hold the carbonation in the second fermentation, which we'll get to. Now you won't need these bottles until about 10 days from when you first make your batch, so you have some time to start collecting those. Next thing you'll need is plain old loose tea, black tea. And you'll need a large infuser of some sort. You could use cheesecloth or a net mesh if you like, but I like these tea infusers. You'll also need 1 cup of sugar when you go to make it. And then finally, you'll need your SCOBY. Now SCOBY is an acronym. It stands for Symbiotic Community of Bacteria and Yeast. And we'll meet the SCOBY a little later. Now where you can get this is either from a friend who also makes kombucha, or you can get a SCOBY starter kit at many health food stores. The first step is to make the tea. So bring this pot of water to boil. Put your tea infuser filled with tea in it and let it sit for 10 to 20 minutes. And you can pull that out. Pour in your cup of sugar while the water is still hot. Stir it up and cover it and let it sit until it comes to room temperature. That's going to be like overnight or all day. It takes a long time to cool down, but it's really important that it does cool down so that it's not too hot for your SCOBY when you go on to the next step. Once the tea has cooled, pour it into your glass jar. I'm going to pour this liquid in too, and you don't want it coming up higher than the shoulder of the jar, so don't fill it too full. Now let's meet the SCOBY. Be sure you have clean hands when you handle it. This is the culture that's going to ferment the kombucha. This is what does the magic. Now each time you make a batch of kombucha, another layer gets added to the SCOBY. And so that's where if you have a friend that wants to take a clone off of your SCOBY, you'll be able to peel this apart and give them one. But in our case, I'm just going to put this whole thing in here now. So I pour it in, and the liquid here is kombucha from my last batch. This just lives in the refrigerator very happily between batches. So I put this in here, and I sort of help it get aligned, laying around on top. There you can see a couple of the different layers there. That's all just fine. So I just let that float, and it'll float by itself to the top over time. You can kind of see it sitting there. And that's it. Now it's ready to just sit here for 7 to 10 days. I put a towel over the top to protect it from stuff in the air, but it does need to breathe, so don't put a airtight top on it. Just a towel is fine. Then you want this to sit for, it usually takes around 10 days unless you happen to be in a very warm environment. You do want to keep it between 75 and 85 degrees. If it's cooler than that, put it on top of a little heating pad or something. Otherwise, you run the risk of mold forming, and the bacteria and the yeast just aren't warm enough to do their fermentation thing. That 7 to 10 day waiting period is your first fermentation. You know it's finished when, if you sample it, the tea tastes not really sweet but not vinegary either, somewhere in the middle according to your taste. Now you're ready to bottle it and let it go through its secondary fermentation where it develops a little fizziness. In order to do that, it needs some sugar added. And what I usually do is pour in a quart of fruit juice, according to whatever flavor I like, and let that fruit juice provide the extra sugar. Flavors that I think work well are tropical fruit blends, or I like cherry or tart cherry, blueberry, pomegranate, anything that's 100% fruit juice in a flavor that you like. So now the next step is simply to dip in and pour it into the bottles. This amount that I've got here typically makes between 10 and 12 16-ounce bottles, so that's how many you need to collect. So fill it up to about here. You want just maybe a ½ inch below the neck here, a little bit of space. That'll help you build up some carbonation. And then put the lid on tight. Oops, put the lid on tight. Be sure that's tight so you keep your carbonation in there. Then you just want to let these sit at room temperature for about 3 days, depending on how fizzy you like it. And that's it. You're done. Keep it in the refrigerator once it has reached the fizziness level that you like, and enjoy. Now, if you get 10 or 12 bottles out of this, and if you like to drink one per day like I do, that means it's time to get started on your next batch right away after you've bottled this, because that's about the cycle where you're going to have more by the time you're done with these. So enjoy making your kombucha and experiment. There's a lot of information online about different ways to do things, but that's your basic recipe. Very easy, very simple. Enjoy!